Hey guys, tonight we're going to slip quietly into a world lit not by lamps or LEDs, but by the soft hiss of wax and flame. Imagine this. You're in old Edo, sometime in the 1700s, when the night still belonged to crickets and the smell of smoke. The streets are narrow, the air tastes faintly of rain and rice straw, and the only thing between you and complete darkness is a candle stub no taller than your thumb. You're about to fall asleep, but then someone tells you that this little flame isn't just for light, it's your clock. Yes, time itself is melting in front of you. And you think, wow, I'd be late to everything. You probably would. You'd miss every meeting, every train. Though to be fair, the trains won't exist for another century. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The night in Edo begins the way all nights do, slow, deliberate, almost shy. The sun dips behind the tiled roofs. The paper windows glow pale orange, and the whole city seems to exhale. You can hear sandals on stone, shutters closing, the faint splash of water as someone fills a basin. Somewhere, a samurai is counting his coins. Somewhere else, a monk is tapping a wooden clapper to signal evening prayers. And almost everywhere, people are lighting candles, slender sticks of wax that don't just fight darkness, but measure it. In this Japan, before the tick of gears or the hum of pendulums, time is not a thing you hear. It's a thing you watch burn. Each household keeps a few special candles marked with little rings or painted stripes. As the wax melts down past each line, another koku, a traditional hour, passes. It's both poetic and deeply impractical, which is basically the theme of human history. You can almost imagine a tired merchant squinting at a candle, muttering, "Is it third bell yet? Or do I still have to pretend to work?" For most of the world back then, the sun told time. Sunrise for work, sunset for rest. But Japan had taken it one step further. They made portable fire hours. You could take a candle with you, like carrying a tiny ticking watch made of flame. And you'd better believe they came in different models. Some burned fast, some slow. Some were thick and smoky, good for winter nights. Others were slim and elegant, the kind favored by poets who wanted to know how long they'd been suffering. But here's the tricky part. The Japanese didn't divide the day evenly. A day wasn't 12 hours of equal length. It was divided into 6 daytime segments and 6 nighttime ones, which changed with the seasons. That means summer hours were longer and winter hours were shorter. Imagine your clock stretching and shrinking like a rubber band every month. It sounds chaotic, but it made sense to people who lived by the sun, not by schedules. You didn't wake up at 6. You woke up when the lights said so. So, when the sun disappeared, the candle took over. It became the new authority, the little bureaucrat of the night. Every household, from farmers to samurai, learned to read its rhythm, the droop of melted wax, the length of its shadow, the moment it sputtered before refilling. Parents would even tell children, bed when the candle reaches the second stripe, and kids would groan exactly as they do now. You can picture it, a family huddled under a paper roof, one candle flickering between them. The mother mends clothes, the father copies a ledger, the children pretend to sleep. The candle burns lower, the room darkens, and the whole family moves a little slower, in sync with the soft, deliberate collapse of wax. Its time is a feeling, not a number. And of course, being human, people immediately try to standardize it. There were arguments about which wax burned truest, beeswax, sumac, or whale oil. Craftsmen debated wick thickness, flame color, and airflow. Somewhere, a man in a smoky workshop probably squinted at his latest batch of candles and said, "Perfect. It burns exactly 1 hour if no one breathes near it." Which, statistically speaking, never happened. In temples, monks used these candles to measure chants, and in samurai homes, guards used them to time shifts. But here, at the start of our story, the candle is still something intimate, a domestic heartbeat. You might even find yourself staring at it, hypnotized by its little dance, half awake and half dreaming, wondering whether the flame is moving slower because you're sleepy or because time itself has grown tired. The people of Edo didn't rush. They didn't have to. The candle would tell them when it was time to rest, when to pray, when to begin again. Its wax dripped like seconds. Its scent marked the passing hours. And when it finally guttered out with a sigh, they knew it wasn't an ending, just the night changing shape. Some historians still argue about when exactly the first time candles appeared, whether in the courts of Kyoto or the temples of Nara, but that doesn't matter much to you now. You're here, watching one burn, listening to the faint hiss of flame on wick. It feels alive, breathing in rhythm with you. Outside, the cicadas quiet. The last lantern on the street fades. The city exhales one final time, and the candle, your only companion, flickers just enough to remind you. The night is passing, and you are part of its measure. Somewhere deep inside that whispering wax, a new hour begins. The next time you blink, the candle has shrunk by half, and the flame has turned the air around it into liquid gold. You watch it breathe, lean, sway, recover, like a tired performer refusing to leave the stage. In old Edo, this was the rhythm everyone trusted. Not the mechanical certainty of gears or pendulums, but the soft persuasion of something that could die at any second. You think, wow, time was flammable back then. And you'd be right. Back in those days, a clock could fit in the palm of your hand, and if you weren't careful, it could also set your sleeve on fire. They called them candles of time, or jikokudo. Each one was carefully measured and carved with tiny grooves, like a wax ruler for hours. The grooves weren't decorative, they were checkpoints. As the flame devoured the wax and reached each mark, you knew another portion of the night had slipped away. It was oddly satisfying, like watching progress bars before progress was invented. But some candles had a more dramatic flair. Instead of painted rings, they came with thin bamboo pegs inserted along their sides. As the flame melted through, the peg would loosen, fall, and clatter onto a little tray or bowl. Plink, a medieval alarm clock with no snooze button. Each plink meant one unit of time had passed. You can almost hear it. Plink, plink, plink. The sound blending with the chirp of night insects, the occasional cough of a neighbor, the faint rustle of silk robes. The sound of time falling apart. These falling peg candles became especially popular among scholars and merchants, people who liked to know how long their tea steeped or their prayers lasted. A samurai might meditate until the fourth peg dropped. A poet might write until the last one fell and left him in darkness. The system worked beautifully until it didn't. Because, let's be honest, wax is moody. On humid nights, it softened too fast. On cold mornings, it burned slower than gossip in a monastery. If a breeze sneaked through your paper wall, time itself bent like smoke. 1 hour could last 40 minutes, or stretch to 90. Entire arguments broke out over whose candle was accurate. Yours burned too quickly, one neighbor might protest. Nonsense, another would insist. The gods simply favor my wick. Historians still debate who first decided to standardize these waxy timekeepers. Some claim a Kyoto merchant guild imposed a burn test. Light 5 candles at once and take the average. Others say temples set the rhythm, adjusting their chants so society stayed roughly synchronized. Either way, there was no master clock, just thousands of flames flickering at slightly different tempos. The city glowed like a constellation of uneven stars, each one telling its own story of how long a night should be. There was something intimate about it, though. Imagine leaning close to that light, watching it lick the air. The candle's surface becomes a miniature landscape, valleys of melting wax, peaks frozen mid-drip, little rivers pooling in the dish below. You can smell it too, a faint sweetness, part oil, part dust, part memory. That's the scent Edo wore at midnight. Every home's light burned differently, but all of them told the same truth. That time was personal. You didn't measure it with a machine, you measured it with something alive. The flame shrank and faltered, just like you did after a long day. The hours became a shared exhaustion, a communal sigh glowing softly behind paper walls. Of course, there were disasters. A candle left unattended could easily tip, setting fire to the tatami mats or the scrolls hanging nearby. The great fires of Edo weren't always caused by accidents of cooking or earthquakes. Sometimes, they started from someone losing track of time in the most literal way possible. Time burned too long, so people got creative. Candle makers began mixing different waxes, sumac for steadiness, beeswax for brightness, even whale oil for luxury households who didn't mind the smell of the ocean crashing into their living rooms. Some even dyed the wax in subtle colors to mark the hours, saffron for early evening, indigo for deep night. It was practical art, if art could ruin your house. And then there were the enthusiasts. Imagine those modern folks who collect mechanical watches and brag about the precision of their Swiss gears. Edo had their version too. Men would argue over the purity of the wick fiber, or how high the flame should be to truly represent an hour. The polite ones kept journals of burn rates. The less polite ones probably threw their neighbors' candles into the river. You can't help but smile. Human beings, no matter the century, will always argue about who's late. As the candlelight trembles, you picture Edo's alleys glowing like veins of gold. Each house a heartbeat, each wick a pulse. Somewhere, a merchant is closing his books by the final notch of wax. Somewhere else, a mother counts the soft plink of a falling peg and knows it's time to wake her husband for the next watch. The city's rhythm isn't marked by bells or gears, but by tiny acts of combustion. Every second must die to prove it existed. You glance again at your own candle, the imaginary one burning in this story, and for a moment, you can almost hear that faint plink echoing through the centuries. Not loud, not insistent, just a gentle reminder that time, like wax, is only meaningful when it melts. Outside, the wind quiets again. The flame steadies. Somewhere, a cat yawns. You breathe with it, your heartbeat matching the candle's pulse. And just as the last peg falls, another hour, and another small piece of history, disappears into the dark. You wake to the faint chime of rain against the roof, the kind that turns the world into a whisper. The candle is gone now, just a stub of wax and the faint ghost of smoke rising from the wick. Time, it seems, has literally burned itself out. You rub your eyes, stretch, and imagine how monks must have felt centuries ago when this same moment arrived. That quiet instant between one flame and the next. In Japan's temples, monks were the first true timekeepers. Not for money, not for work, but for prayer. Each chant, each ritual, each gong strike had to land precisely, even if precisely meant trusting a candle instead of a clock. You picture one of them now, shaved head, calm face, back straight, hands folded. Before him burns a candle divided by inked rings. Every time the wax melts past a mark, he knows it's time for the next sutra. And in a way, that's beautiful, but also deeply stressful. Imagine if your entire spiritual schedule depended on a candle's mood. You'd have to pray extra hard that it didn't flicker out mid-chant. Monks developed tricks, of course. They'd place the candle inside a hollow tube of metal or clay to block the wind. They'd add a bit of fragrant oil to the wick to make the flame burn brighter, and to mask the smell of melting animal fat, which was, let's say, not conducive to enlightenment. Some even built elaborate contraptions, a bowl of water placed below, so when the candle burned too low, it snuffed itself out with a satisfying psh. But even monks, paragons of serenity, couldn't ignore the problem of time stretching and shrinking like machi dough. Their hours changed with the seasons, just like everyone else's. So they learned to listen instead. When the cicadas sang, they knew summer's hours were longer. When the wind hissed through dry reeds, they knew winter had shortened them. Some historians still argue whether temple candles inspired Japan's incense clocks, those graceful coils of scented powder that burned silently through the night. But we'll get there soon enough. For now, imagine the monk adjusting his robes, glancing at the shrinking candle, and thinking not of eternity, but of logistics. He dips his brush into ink and marks the candle for tomorrow. Each ring must be even, each stroke straight. He does it with a precision that borders on reverence. You'd think he's drawing the boundary between heaven and earth. And in a way, he is, because when the wax meets the line, it signals not just another prayer, but another heartbeat in the endless rhythm of devotion. There's a story, half legend, half footnote, about a temple in Kyoto where the abbot became obsessed with accuracy. He noticed that on humid days, the candles burned slower. On dry days, faster. So he ordered his apprentices to chart the rate of burn for every season, then created a schedule of corrections. For each day of the lunar calendar, there was a note: add 1 line of wax. Remove 1 line of wax. It was Japan's first daylight saving system, minus the angry debates on Twitter. One apprentice complained, "But master, the candle burns as it pleases." The abbot smiled and said, "Then we must please the candle." You can't tell whether that's wisdom or sarcasm, but it works either way. In the stillness of the temple, the candle's light dances across scrolls of sutra. The air is heavy with sandalwood and smoke. You can almost hear the soft chorus of chanting, deep, rhythmic, endless. The monks' voices rise and fall with the flicker of flame, each syllable a small offering to the gods of time. And when the candle finally bows to the dark, they bow too, acknowledging that even light must rest. In those hours, keeping time wasn't about control. It was about awareness. You didn't dominate the clock, you observed it. You watched the wax melt, the flame breathe, the shadows stretch. It wasn't numbers and gears, it was intimacy, the quiet knowledge that existence itself was fragile and fleeting. You wonder if they ever got distracted. Maybe one monk, half asleep, watched his candle lean too far, spill wax onto his prayer mat, and cursed softly before catching himself. A small scandal in an otherwise holy night. The temple dogs probably wagged their tails in the doorway, amused at how seriously humans took their tiny flames. Outside, dawn creeps back into the sky, pale and slow. The monks finish their morning chants, the sound blending with the caw of distant crows. The candle gutters one last time, its wick curling like a bow. Someone takes a deep breath, exhales, and says, "It is morning." No clocks, no calendars, just the quiet agreement between fire and breath. You shift in your imaginary seat, the image of the monk still lingering in your mind. His patience, his steadiness, his absolute trust in a thing so fragile. You think about your own mornings, alarms screaming, phones buzzing, the chaos of 5 more minutes. If you lived here, you'd probably never oversleep again. Then again, you'd probably burn down your apartment. As the temple bells begin to ring, the sound rolls through the valley, a bronze wave gliding over the rooftops, bouncing off the forest. The candle is gone, but its smoke still curls in the air, a last echo of time passing gently into memory. You close your eyes, hearing that deep hum of chanting fade into silence. The candle may have melted, but the hour it marked still burns quietly inside you. By the time you step outside again, still in your imagination, still barefoot in the echo of candle smoke, the world feels different. The temple fades behind you, replaced by the slow heartbeat of a city that never sleeps, not because it's loud, but because it's alive. You're walking through Edo again, the capital of paper doors and wooden sandals, and it's morning now. Pale light, wet stone, merchants sweeping the street with brooms that whisper like soft applause. You pass a row of shops, each one with a flicker of life inside. One sells silk, another sells salt, and a third, tucked behind a sign painted in brushstrokes that look like waves, sells time itself. The candle shop smells like everything comforting: beeswax, wood ash, a hint of incense. Shelves line the walls, stacked with pale cylinders arranged like scrolls. The shopkeeper, an old woman with hands that look carved from oak, nods without looking up. She's measuring a fresh wick by eye, her movements steady and certain. "Traveling?" she asks. "Not exactly, you say? Just passing through time." She laughs, a soft sound, like kindling catching. "Aren't we all?" Here, in the heart of Edo, the art of candle making has become as refined as tea ceremony. Every craftsman, every candle maker, is both scientist and poet. They don't just pour wax, they compose hours. You watch her work. She takes a wooden mold, pours melted wax in slow, practiced movements, and waits. When she removes the candle, it gleams faintly in the sunlight, a smooth ivory pillar streaked with faint red ink. Summer hours, she explains, burns faster. She points to another, thicker, dyed a warm saffron hue. Winter hours, for long nights and long thoughts. You pick one up. It's heavier than you expect, cool and faintly sticky. The ink marks are almost musical in their rhythm. She notices your curiosity and smiles. Each line is one koku, she says, but don't trust it too much. Tom likes to argue. You grin. Doesn't it always? These candle shops were more than stores. They were calibration centers for the city's pulse. Merchants bought candles to time their sales. Cooks bought them to know when rice was ready. Even courtesans in the pleasure quarters used them to measure the length of a guest's visit. Romantic, in a mathematical kind of way. Historians still debate which district made the best time candles. Was it Nyanbashi, where merchants demanded precision, or Asakusa, where artists preferred candles that burned beautifully even if they lied about the hour? The arguments sometimes turned heated, figuratively and literally. One account tells of rival candle guilds holding competitions. They'd light 2 candles side by side, then watch to see which flame outlasted the other. Crowds would gather. Bets would be placed. It was basically the 18th century equivalent of Formula One, just slower and flammable. And then there were the luxury candles, the ones scented with plum blossom or camellia, made for high-ranking samurai and the merchant elite. They burned in ornate bronze holders shaped like lotus petals or cranes, casting shadows so beautiful that poets wrote verses about them. There's one haiku, short, simple, that you might hear whispered here. The candle shortens / its flame steady, as breathing / time bows and follows. You picture the poet who wrote it, watching his candle melt and realizing it's writing a poem back at him. The old woman hands you a small candle, its base carved with tiny wave patterns. For travel, she says. It lasts as long as one dream. You slip it into your bag and step back into the street. The air feels different now, thicker, warmer. The sun has climbed higher, and the shadows lean shorter. Edo hums like a living creature, every alley full of movement, every doorway full of purpose. Somewhere nearby, a clock tower clangs, a rare one, imported from the Dutch traders in Nagasaki. Its sound is sharp, metallic, and oddly jarring after the soft language of wax and flame. You can almost hear the shift in history, the slow, inevitable march from candlelight to machinery. But that's still far in the future. For now, the candle reigns. You find yourself wandering toward the Sumida River. The water glints like a ribbon of silver. A barge passes, carrying crates marked with brush-written symbols. Wax, sumac, Nagasaki. The trade routes have made time a commodity, something to be refined, packed, and sold. A boy on the pier waves a stick of wax, half melted, like a flag. Time for lunch, he shouts to his father. And somehow, you know he's not joking. You sit on a wooden bench, the candle shop scent still clinging to your sleeve. The image of that old woman stays with you, her calm, her precision, her quiet defiance against a world that's always running ahead. As the breeze ripples through the water, you think about what she said. Time likes to argue. It's true. It argues with weather, with breath, with light, with memory. It argues with you every morning when your alarm insists it's already later than you think. But here, in Edo's wax-scented streets, time still feels human, fragile, handmade, a thing you can hold between your fingers and ruin if you're careless. You take out the little travel candle, touch its cool surface, and smile. Maybe, for just one night, you'll let it burn and let time decide when to stop. And as you imagine striking that match, a thought flickers in your mind like the first spark of flame. Even the most fleeting light can measure eternity, if you know how to watch it melt. The day ripens, as all days do, until the air turns the color of warm tea. You find yourself walking along the narrow backstreets of Edo where sunlight filters through paper screens and dust dances in golden beams. The The candle you bought earlier weighs in your sleeve pocket, softening slightly with your body heat. You think of the old woman's words, "It lasts as long as one dream," and wonder whose dream she meant. Down one alley, you hear the rhythmic tapping of bamboo, a sound that makes you pause. When you follow it, you find a small workshop hidden behind a curtain of drying paper. Inside, a young craftsman sits cross-legged, surrounding himself with coils of fine ash and crushed incense. He's tracing a spiral on a wooden board, careful not to breathe too hard. "Don't come too close," he warns softly. "You'll scatter the hours." Oh, so this is what the monk's candles evolved into, the incense clock, or kadoki-eye. Instead of flame, time here moves by smoke. Powdered incense is pressed into intricate shapes, straight lines, circles, spirals, and then lit at one end. As it burns, it releases fragrance and a thin trail of ash, its pace so steady it could calm a storm. The air smells faintly of sandalwood and plum, and you suddenly understand why people used to measure time by scent. You crouch beside the craftsman, watching him draw the delicate spiral. "Each coil is 6 hours," he says, "and if I'm careless, it will burn too fast or stop altogether." He glances up with a crooked smile. You'd be amazed how much chaos can fit into a circle. It's true. The spiral of incense looks perfect, but it's treacherous. A single grain out of place, and time itself stutters. He lights one end with a small taper. The smoke begins its slow dance, curling upward, lazy and confident. You lean in, mesmerized. The scent changes every few minutes, from pine to clove to sweet lotus, and you realize this isn't just a timekeeper. It's a meditation. Each aroma marks a passage. In some noble houses, they said women used incense clocks to pace poetry readings or conversations. In others, generals used them to schedule night watches, burning specific blends so the guards could tell the hour by smell. Imagine standing in the dark and knowing dawn is near because the air tastes faintly of cinnamon. Some historians still debate who first designed this miraculous fusion of perfume and precision. Chinese records mention similar devices centuries earlier, but Japan perfected them. It wasn't enough for time to move. It had to smell good doing it. The craftsman shows you a box filled with tiny metal inlays, dragons, birds, and waves. Each one leaves a pattern of ash when placed over the incense. "Time should be beautiful," he says, arranging them. "Otherwise, why bother keeping it?" You watch as the smoke drifts toward a window slit, slipping into the world beyond. It feels alive, like a sigh escaping the earth itself. The craftsman chuckles softly. "Sometimes," he adds, "a nobleman would order a coil shaped like his family crest, just to show off. You'd walk into his house and smell pride burning slowly in the corner." You laugh. "So even back then, people flexed with custom timepieces." He nods. "Yes, but theirs came with free aromatherapy." In the distance, a bell tolls from a temple, its tone deep and resonant. The craftsman doesn't flinch. "That's the hour of the ox," he says. "Between 1 and 3 in the morning. The time for thieves, poets, and people who can't sleep." You glance around, suddenly realizing there's no daylight here. The workshop is dim, eternal, a pocket of incense smoke where hours blur. You don't know how long you've been sitting. That's the irony, isn't it? The more you focus on time, the less you notice it passing. Outside, Edo hums on. The clatter of wooden clogs, the rustle of merchant carts, the faint laugh of a street singer rehearsing her tune. The incense continues to burn, marking every sound with invisible precision. The craftsman begins sweeping the ashes of an old coil into a small pouch. "People throw these away," he says, "but they're what time leaves behind." He presses the pouch into your hand. The ash is cool, weightless, and smells faintly of eternity. "Keep it," he says. "It reminds you that even when time is gone, something of it remains." You bow slightly, unsure how to thank someone who just handed you the ghost of a day. When you step outside, the world feels sharper. The air is clearer, the streets busier. You catch whiffs of smoke from other houses, each scent a different hour, each curl a different memory. You realize Edo doesn't run on clocks or bells at all. It runs on fragrance. Every street corner smells of another moment passing. As you walk along the canal, you imagine a city seen from above, a map of spirals, smoke rising from 1,000 incense clocks, drifting and mingling until all of Edo smells like a single, endless hour. The idea makes you smile. Maybe that's why they called it the floating world. The pouch of ash rests in your palm, fragile as breath. You think of how modern time smells like nothing, just static and screens. And you miss, suddenly and irrationally, a world where the passage of an hour could perfume your clothes. You tuck the pouch away. The wind shifts, bringing with it the faintest trace of plum blossom. Somewhere, an incense coil ends. Somewhere else, another begins. And for a heartbeat, you can smell time moving. The wind carries that last thread of incense smoke away, and you follow it instinctively, like a cat chasing sunlight. It leads you toward a hill at the edge of the city, where tiled roofs fall away into a horizon of pines and mist. The slope is gentle but long, the kind that makes you feel as though you're walking not up, but back into a quieter part of the world, where monks still walk barefoot, and the air itself seems to think. At the top of the hill stands a wooden gate, weathered but proud. Beyond it, the temple of Shikokaji, and within its walls, the sound of metal and fire. You step through the gate, and the scent of hot iron greets you first, sharp, almost bitter. It's the smell of time being forged. In a small courtyard, a blacksmith and his apprentice are hammering the rim of a massive bell. Sparks leap like fireflies. Each strike of the hammer echoes into the valley, rolling over the treetops and dissolving into the morning haze. The bell is taller than you, carved with dragons that curl around its shoulders. Its surface gleams where the hammer has struck it clean. You realize, suddenly, that this isn't just a bell. It's a clock. Before the mechanical clocks of Europe arrived, temple bells were Japan's public timekeepers. They rang not by the hour, but by feeling, by rhythm, by ritual, by the patient wisdom of the monks who struck them. When the bell tolled, it wasn't telling you that it was 6 a.m. It was telling you the world is awake again. The blacksmith wipes sweat from his brow and notices you watching. Every sound has its shape, he says. This one's shaped like sunrise. You nod, entranced. The apprentice dips a ladle of molten bronze from the forge, pouring it carefully into the bell's rim. Do people still use candles? You ask. The blacksmith chuckles. For prayer, yes. For time, no. The bell doesn't melt, only sings. There's a sort of reverence in his words. The bell represents a different kind of clock, one that doesn't consume itself to mark time, but resonates outward, reminding everything within hearing that existence continues. When it's cooled, the apprentice lifts a wooden mallet and strikes the bell once, experimentally. The sound is deep, so deep you can feel it in your ribs. It doesn't just echo, it breathes. You imagine it rolling through the villages below, bouncing off the water, slipping through the shutters of sleeping homes. In that moment, it's not just marking time, it's giving it meaning. Monks in their gray robes gather, each carrying a wooden hammer, and the ritual begins. They bow, they chant, and then, one by one, they strike the bell. Not in unison, but in a pattern older than memory. The air trembles with harmony. You watch them and think. This was the sound of civilization remembering itself. Some historians still argue whether these bells counted time or created it. Did people live by the rhythm of the bell, or did the bell simply mirror the rhythm of their lives? The answer, perhaps, doesn't matter. What matters is that every village, every temple, every fisherman out at sea knew the feeling of those vibrations, the way they wrapped the world in invisible hands. A story drifts to you, told by an old monk nearby as he polishes the rim of a smaller bell. When a new bell was first rung, he says, we believed it frightened away demons of confusion and laziness. That's why each strike had to be pure. No hesitation, no vanity, just intent. You smile. So it's like the first alarm clock, except it scares off bad thoughts instead of your will to live. The monk chuckles, eyes creasing. Perhaps both. He invites you to try. You hesitate, but curiosity wins. You lift the mallet, it's heavier than it looks, and strike gently. The sound blooms like light through fog. For an instant, you feel it travel through your chest, down your arms, into the ground beneath your feet. When it fades, the silence that follows feels almost holy. The monk bows slightly. Now you've heard the hour within yourself. There's something haunting about that. Candles burned the hours, incense perfumed them, but bells embodied them. Each ring was a moment made physical, a vibration you could touch with your bones. As the monks return to their prayers, you sit at the edge of the courtyard, watching the smoke rise from the forge. The blacksmith has gone back to work, hammering rhythmically, his movements guided not by sight, but by sound. Time here is all resonance, every strike, every tone, a reminder that the present exists only because it's ringing. Beyond the temple walls, Edo stirs. You can hear the faint bustle of carts and footsteps in the distance. But up here, on this hill of fire and bronze, time is a circle of sound. The monk returns, handing you a small bronze charm in the shape of a bell. To remind you, he says, that silence is just time waiting to ring again. You turn it over in your palm, feeling the cool metal press into your skin. You realize it's the same color as candle wax in moonlight. You smile. Funny how all of Japan's clocks, no matter their form, return to something elemental, flame, smoke, or echo. You tuck the charm into your sleeve and rise to leave. As you walk back down the hill, the last sound that follows you is that deep, living hum. The voice of time itself, singing low and slow across the centuries. And if you listen closely enough, it still hasn't stopped. By the time you reach the base of the hill, the air has changed again. It's heavier now, full of heat and the tang of human life. Fish grilling somewhere nearby, the rhythmic chatter of merchants calling out prices, the faint hiss of oil in iron pans. You're back in the city proper, where time doesn't hum like a bell or breathe like incense. Here, time bargains. It slips between coins and contracts, between the sizzle of tempura and the rustle of silk sleeves. You follow the smell of soy and charcoal through the crowded market. Everything moves fast, vendors counting change, children chasing paper balloons, couriers darting past with scrolls tied to their backs. Yet, despite the chaos, it all runs in rhythm, as if someone somewhere is still measuring the seconds with quiet precision. And then you see it, a wooden tower rising above the rooftops, its roof curved like a samurai's helmet. A small crowd gathers below, eyes turned upward. That's the Toki no Kane. An old man mutters beside you, the bell of time. You remember now, each district had one, a civic clock that announced dawn, midday, sunset, and the curfew hour. But this tower isn't struck by monks or blacksmiths. A young man climbs the stairs, carrying a torch. When he reaches the top, he pulls a rope, and the bell above him tolls. 1, 2, 3 times. Its sound is thinner than the temple bells, but sharper, like the edge of a sword cutting through smoke. The crowd murmurs. People glance at the sky, at their baskets, at one another. A fishmonger wraps up his last mackerel. A samurai adjusts his sash. A mother calls her children in from the street. The sound organizes the entire district like a conductor's baton. You realize that even here, in the beating heart of Edo's commerce, people still live by wax and echo. When the Toki no Kane rings, the courtesans of Yoshiwara prepare for night. When the 8th bell sounds, the city's gates close. Time is both law and lullaby. A merchant nearby laughs. If you hear the bell and you're still drinking, you're already late. You grin. So, the bell is like last call. He nods sagely. Exactly. The gods hate hangovers. But as you listen to the bell fade, another sound begins. A soft whistle, mechanical and deliberate. You turn and see a foreigner adjusting a small brass contraption on a table. He's surrounded by curious onlookers, including a few scholars in indigo robes. The device ticks audibly, its gears turning behind a glass face. Imported from the Dutch, someone whispers. It tells time without fire or smoke. You step closer. The foreigner demonstrates, winding it with a key. The hands move precisely, slicing time into perfect fractions. A gasp runs through the crowd. For a moment, the entire marketplace goes silent. as if everyone realizes they're witnessing something quietly revolutionary. The scholar beside you mutters, half to himself, "So this is what the West does. They trap time in a box." He says it with awe and suspicion in equal measure. You lean over the table, hearing the relentless tick, tick, tick. It's strange, cold, mathematical, yet hypnotic. You've spent days now following time that glowed, smoked, and sang. But this is time caged. The foreigner smiles proudly. "It never lies," he declares in broken Japanese. "Always same speed." The merchant who spoke earlier chuckles. "Then it doesn't understand summer." Laughter ripples through the crowd. The foreigner looks puzzled, but the scholars exchange knowing glances. In Japan, time had always breathed. Long days in summer, short ones in winter, the candle marks shifting with the seasons. A clock that refused to bend with sunlight felt almost arrogant. Still, curiosity wins. People start trading coins for miniature versions, pocket watches, small enough to slip into a sleeve. They marvel at the ticking, whispering about accuracy as if it were magic. You can feel the old rhythm of Edo, wax, smoke, bells, beginning to fracture. The merchant beside you sighs. "I suppose one day, the bells will stop." You glance at the tower, its bell glinting faintly in the afternoon sun. "Maybe," you say, "but I think it'll take a long time for people to trust a heartbeat made of metal." He smiles. "Maybe so. Until then, I'll trust the candle." He gestures toward a small stall nearby where an apprentice is measuring wax. You almost laugh. Time, it seems, still has more than one face here. A few children gather around the clock, watching its hands turn. One points and whispers. "It's like a tiny sun that never moves." You can't help thinking how right that is. As the day fades toward evening, the marketplace begins to empty. The foreigner packs up his clock. The bell tower waits for dusk. You linger, feeling the city balance on a knife edge between old and new. Somewhere behind you, a monk's bell tolls in the distance. Lower, slower, more human. It's as if the old ways are answering back. And for a brief, perfect moment, the sounds overlap. The metallic tick of imported precision and the deep, rolling note of handmade eternity. The two rhythms meet, argue, and then, almost politely, drift apart again. The foreigner leaves. The crowd disperses. You're alone beneath the tower, the last echo of the bell trembling in the air. It hits you then. Japan's way of telling time wasn't just about measuring life. It was about feeling it. You look up. The sky has turned amber, the bell's silhouette sharp against the dying light. Somewhere, unseen, the next candle is being lit. Another hour begins, not from gears or glass, but from flame. You smile faintly. For now, the old world still holds. But you can already hear the ticking coming. Night folds over Edo like a silk curtain, slow, soundless, inevitable. Lanterns bloom along the streets one by one, their paper sides glowing with soft amber light. The bells have gone quiet, the vendors have packed their wares, and the river mirrors 1,000 tiny flames drifting on its surface. You walk along the embankment, the scent of grilled eel and wood smoke lingering like a memory. Somewhere in the distance, a watchman calls out, striking two wooden clappers together. "Fire and thieves, beware," he chants rhythmically. His voice ripples down the empty street, and you can almost hear time itself walking beside him, barefoot and drowsy. Tonight, Edo sleeps, but never all at once. In the pleasure quarters of Yoshiwara, night is when time begins anew. You hear faint laughter, the soft clink of sake cups, the slow twang of a shamisen. You follow the music, your sandals clicking softly on the stones, until the narrow lanes widen into a street bathed in crimson light. Here, candles rule again, hundreds of them. In paper lanterns, in bronze stands, in long trays before lacquered mirrors. Each one drips slow and steady, the wax forming delicate stalactites of time. Courtesans move through the glow like spirits made of silk and powder, their kimonos blooming with patterns of cranes and chrysanthemums. The air smells of camellia oil and perfume, the warmth of so many candles turning the night almost tropical. A courtesan passes by, her sleeves brushing your arm. She smiles knowingly, not flirtation, but recognition. "You're not from here," she says, voice low as music from another room. "You're walking like you're counting." You laugh. "Maybe I am. Candles make me nervous. I can see time disappearing." She smiles wider, leading you toward a low table where a single red candle burns beside a half-finished cup of tea. "Here," she says, gesturing for you to sit. "This one's almost out. Perfect for conversation that shouldn't last too long." You settle across from her, watching the flame bend slightly with every breath you take. "Do you ever think about how many lives fit into one candle?" You ask. She tilts her head, amused. "No," she says softly. "But I know exactly how long it takes to fall in love before the wax runs out." There's a melancholy wisdom in her tone, not sad, just practiced. Around you, other tables glow and flicker, each one its own universe of laughter, secrets, and fading time. You realize the courtesans of Yoshiwara were not just performers, but timekeepers in their own way. Their art lived only in the moment, vanishing as surely as flame on wax. She pours sake, the liquid catching the candlelight like molten gold. "Once," she says, "a poet told me that candles burn faster when people lie. So I stopped lying." You grin. A dangerous philosophy in your line of work. Her eyes sparkle. Or a convenient one. The truth is easier to sell when it's beautiful. You sip, feeling warmth slide through you. The room hums softly with voices, the occasional burst of laughter, the rustle of silk. Above it all, the steady hiss of burning wicks ties everything together, the pulse of a city alive in its own illusion. Some historians still argue that Yoshiwara was Edo's dream engine, the place where time softened, bent, even paused for a price. But sitting here, you realize it wasn't about escape. It was about rhythm. The courtesans, musicians, and poets all kept their own secret clocks. A glance, a gesture, a verse, each moment measured not by minutes, but by emotion. The courtesan notices your gaze lingering on the candle. "You're thinking like a monk again," she teases. "You're waiting for enlightenment before the wax runs out." You shrug. "Or maybe I'm waiting for the wax to run out because of enlightenment." She laughs quietly, that rare sound that makes you want to close your eyes. "In this city," she says, "enlightenment only visits after the third cup." So you pour another, and the candle burns lower. Shadows grow longer across the paper walls, the world narrowing to just flame, face, and fragrance. When the wick finally sputters and dies, she leans forward, blowing the last curl of smoke toward you. It drifts across your face, smelling faintly of honey and ash. "Time's up," she whispers. "You made it to the end." You stand, bowing slightly, but before you go, she presses something into your hand. A small wax stub, cold now, almost weightless. "A keepsake," she says. "So you remember that not all light comes from the sun." You nod, slipping it into your sleeve beside the bronze bell charm and the incense ash. Your collection of time grows heavier. Outside, the air is cooler. The music fades behind you, replaced by the distant knock of the watchman's clappers. You pass another street where only a few lanterns still burn, and suddenly the silence feels thicker, intimate. You pause, looking back toward Yoshiwara. The windows flicker like stars trapped behind paper. Somewhere inside, another candle is being lit, another story beginning, another hour being purchased from the dark. You think of the courtesan's words, about candles burning faster when people lie. Maybe that's why history keeps losing its flame. Too many lies, not enough patience. You walk on, the stub of wax pressing lightly against your palm, as if still warm. Ahead, the river gleams faintly, reflecting both moon and firelight. You realize that Edo, in its way, was a city of candles, each person a flame burning briefly, brightly, beautifully. And though night still stretches ahead, the glow never truly dies. It only moves from one wick to another, one dream to the next. And somewhere behind you, laughter carries on the wind, keeping time with the heartbeats of 1,000 flickering lives. Dawn returns like a sigh of relief. The sky above Edo softens from black to blue-gray, then to the gentle rose of a half-remembered dream. The streets are still damp from the night's mist, and the last lanterns flicker out one by one, their wicks curling into tiny ghosts of smoke. You stretch your shoulders, the weight of sleepless hours sitting somewhere between your ribs and your memory. The courtesan's wax stub is still in your pocket, light as a secret, softening now with the warmth of your hand. You roll it between your fingers as you walk, watching the city wake up in fragments. A shopkeeper sweeping his doorway, a fisherman hauling baskets from the canal, a child chasing an invisible friend through puddles. Time has always been the quietest thing in the morning. You cross a wooden bridge, its planks damp and glistening, and pause halfway. Below, the river glows faintly gold in the first light. A barge drifts past, its oars dipping rhythmically, water slapping against wood. For a brief moment, the world feels weightless, a slow exhale before the day begins its relentless arithmetic again. And then you hear it. Tick, tick, tick. The sound doesn't belong here. It's too precise, too foreign. You glance around until you find the source, a small shop tucked beneath a sign, painted with the characters Sunagafung, Workshop of Time. Inside, the air hums faintly with motion. Rows of brass instruments hang on the walls, compasses, sextants, hourglasses filled with powdered coral. But what dominates the room are the clocks, pendulums swinging, gears turning, each one whispering its own little truth about inevitability. The shopkeeper, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers, looks up from his bench. "You hear them too, don't you?" he says. You nod, stepping closer. "It sounds like rain," you say. "If rain obeyed mathematics." He laughs softly. "Ah, that's what they all say at first. Then they start hearing heartbeat instead." He shows you a pocket watch, small, silver, its face etched with waves. "Made last winter," he explains. "But she still ticks like spring." He opens it, and you watch the balance will swing back and forth, hypnotic. "Do you make them all yourself?" He nods proudly. "Clocks, yes. Time, no. I just persuade it to behave for a while." On the shelves behind him sit strange hybrids, a candle clock with embedded gears, a sundial mounted on a wooden stand shaped like a bird, even a bell that chimes not by pull, but by wind. You realize that Edo hasn't abandoned its old ways at all. It's folding them into something new. "Japan never replaces," he says, as if reading your thoughts. "We layer." The candle still burns, but now it burns beside a ticking heart. You watch as he adjusts one of the larger clocks, a water clock, its basin painted with lotus flowers. Drops fall rhythmically into the pool below, each one rippling outward like a miniature earthquake. "Do people buy many of these?" you ask. He shrugs. "The samurai want accuracy. The poets want beauty. The merchants want both." You smile. "And what do you want?" He pauses, then gestures toward a dusty clock in the corner, a foreign one, its brass dulled with age. "That one came from Nagasaki," he says quietly. "When I was a boy, I thought if I wound it long enough, I could make the past run again." He chuckles softly. Turns out, it only ever moves forward. For a moment, the shop feels almost sacred, a temple of small eternities. Every tick echoes off the wooden walls, a choir of gentle insistence. You close your eyes, and the sound becomes a pulse, steady and human. The shopkeeper breaks the silence. "Some historians argue," he says, "that when Japan learned to measure time like the Dutch, we lost something. That we started living by machines instead of moods." You open your eyes. "And do you agree?" He smiles faintly. "I think we just learned a new rhythm. Time didn't change, we did." He winds the pocket watch once more, hands it to you. "Here, listen." You hold it up to your ear. Tick, tick, tick. Each beat is clean, confident, without the soft uncertainty of candle wax or temple bells. Yet beneath that perfection, you can almost hear a faint echo, the ghost of dripping water, of melting wax, of monks' hammers striking bronze. The new sound hasn't erased the old, it's just singing on top of it. The shopkeeper nods toward the door. "Take it outside. The sun's climbing now. See if you can hear it differently under open sky." You step out, the ticking sharp against the hush of dawn. Around you, Edo stirs fully awake. Paper shutters slide open. Merchants unfurl banners. A rooster crows like a badly tuned horn. The city inhales. You raise the pocket watch again. Its ticking feels almost alive now, a heartbeat answering the pulse of the waking world. You imagine each gear as a small candle flame trapped behind glass, burning not in light, but in motion. It's strangely comforting, this new rhythm. Less poetic, maybe, but persistent, the sort of time that refuses to drift or fade. You tuck the watch into your sleeve, where it joins the wax stub and the bell charm. The three together make a strange trinity: flame, echo, motion, past, spirit, and precision. As you walk back across the bridge, the morning sun catches the river in ripples of gold. The light hits your sleeve, and for an instant you swear the watch ticks in time with the shimmering water. You smile to yourself. Maybe time, no matter how we try to measure it, always finds a way to flow. Behind you, the workshop door creaks shut. Ahead, the city waits, ticking, breathing, burning, as if the whole of Edo is one great clock, and you've just joined its rhythm. By midday, Edo blazes under the kind of sunlight that turns roofs into mirrors and streets into ribbons of heat. You pull your cloak tighter out of habit, though it does nothing to fight the warmth. Around you, the city moves like a living creature. Carts creaking, sandals scuffing, dogs napping in patches of shadow. The rhythm feels faster now, as if someone wound the whole city a little too tightly this morning. You make your way toward the outskirts, where the crowds thin and the air smells faintly of straw and earth. The rice paddies stretch wide and brilliant, reflecting the sky like fragments of a broken mirror. Farmers in wide hats move methodically through the flooded fields, their reflections rippling with every motion. This is where time slows again, not the city's kind of time, nor the temples, but something older. Agricultural time, the time of mud and seasons, of waiting for clouds. You watch an old farmer lift his head and squint at the sun. He's holding a short candle stub in one hand, a wooden stick marked with black lines in the other. He sets the candle on the stick, lights it with flint, and watches the wax begin to drip. You step closer, curious. Counting the hours? You ask. He smiles, his face wrinkling like folded cloth. No, he says. Counting the shadows. You look again. The stick isn't for measuring wax. It's planted in the mud beside the paddy. As the candle burns, its flame casts a tiny moving shadow across the wet surface. He's timing irrigation, not life. When the shadow reaches the next reed, he'll close the sluice gate. Clever, you say? He grins. My grandfather's method. Candles don't lie to the sun. They just follow it slowly. He hands you the stick to hold. Here, feel the balance. It's light, but steady, the wax dripping in perfect rhythm. You can almost hear the faint hiss each time a drop hits the water below. Back then, he continues, temples told us when to pray, bells told us when to sleep, and candles told us when to stop flooding our neighbors. You laugh. That last part sounds the most important. He nods solemnly. We like our rice dry and our tempers drier. You glance at the candle again. So even out here, far from temples, you still burn time. He shrugs. Fire doesn't care where it burns. It keeps the day honest. You watch the candle shrink. The light trembles in the faint wind, its reflection shivering in the water. What happens if the wind blows it out? You ask. He smiles. Then the gods have already decided how much rice we need. There's an ease to him, the kind that comes from measuring life by patience instead of minutes. You realize this man lives by the same rhythm that once governed the empire, soft, adaptive, elastic. The candle gives no fixed certainty, only a promise of consistency within change. As he works, he tells you that farmers often used hyoshi gake, rhythm boards, to keep time while planting. A man at one end of the field would beat a drum or wooden clapper, and the others would step in rhythm, spacing seedlings evenly. If the drummer was drunk, he says, chuckling, the rows would dance too. You imagine it, a whole field of crooked lines swaying like calligraphy after too much sake. So your harvest depends on tempo, you ask. Of course, he says. The earth likes music. Without rhythm, crops forget when to grow. You look out over the paddies again, realizing the truth in his words. The entire landscape breathes in patterns. Wind through reeds, ripples through water, dragonflies hovering like punctuation marks. Every living thing here is marking time, just not in the same units as your pocket watch. The watch ticks softly against your chest, a polite reminder of a different order. You take it out, comparing its precision with the candle's drift. Two forms of time, side by side. One exact, one forgiving. You turn to the farmer. If you had to choose, you ask, which one's truer, the candle or the clock? He squints at you, then at the horizon, where the mountains are just beginning to shimmer. The clock is clever, he says, but the candle knows when to stop. He takes back the stick, snuffs the flame with 2 fingers, and tosses the softened wax into the mud. It hisses softly, vanishing into the earth. Everything that burns goes back to something, he says. That's real time. You thank him and continue along the path, feeling the rhythm of the countryside beneath your feet. The air smells of rain now, though the sky remains clear, that premonition farmers recognize before anyone else. As you walk, you think about how every version of time you've met so far, monks' bells, courtesans' candles, merchants' clocks, farmers' shadows, exists not to dominate life, but to fit it. The West might have trapped time in brass and glass, but here, it still breathes, adjusts, forgives. Behind you, you hear the distant thump of the farmer's rhythm board, marking the next field. The sound merges with the ticking of your watch, and for a moment, it feels like harmony. 2 different centuries keeping pace together. You smile, tucking the watch back into your sleeve. The wax stub in your pocket presses lightly against your palm, faintly sticky now, like memory refusing to harden. The road ahead stretches wide, the horizon rippling in the heat. Somewhere far away, a temple bell rings noon, a deep, slow sound that rolls across the plains like thunder too tired to storm. And for a moment, you feel the rarest kind of calm, the kind that comes when time itself seems to nod in approval, letting you pass unmeasured. By late afternoon, the light has turned syrupy, slow, gold, and thick with dust. You leave the paddies behind, the air changing from earthy to metallic as you near the edge of Edo's craft district. Hammers ring somewhere in the distance, sharp and steady, like punctuation marks in a sentence too long to end. You follow the sound until you reach a small courtyard shaded by wisteria vines. Beneath them sits a man hunched over a wooden bench, surrounded by tools, chisels, saws, brushes, bowls of powdered pigment. The air smells of lacquer and ash. He looks up as you approach, his face streaked with soot and pride. Looking for a sword? He asks, voice rough from smoke. Not today, you answer. I think I've got enough sharp things to worry about. He laughs, showing teeth stained with years of pipe smoke. Then you've come for something rarer, time made solid. You raise an eyebrow. Time. He gestures toward a strange contraption, half hidden under cloth. An incense clock, he says, pulling the cover aside. It looks simple, a long wooden box filled with fine ash, a thin trail pressed into the shape of a winding path. Tiny metal bells hang at intervals along its edge, each suspended by silk thread. When the incense burns down, he explains, it severs the threads. The bells fall. You know an hour has passed, or a thought, depending on the company. You lean closer. The scent of the incense is subtle, not floral, not smoky, but ancient. How long does one line burn? He shrugs. Depends on the weather, the thickness, the mood of the day. Time isn't always obedient. You smile. That sounds less like a clock and more like a personality test. He grins. Exactly. The samurai love them. Poets too. You can't argue with a flame you can't see. He shows you a small box carved with cranes. Inside lies another clock. This one's circular, the incense wound like a labyrinth. This is for long nights, he says. Meditation, prayer, or waiting for someone who isn't coming back. You trace the shape of the spiral with your eyes, imagining the slow, invisible burn crawling inward toward the center. Time consuming itself quietly. What happens when it reaches the end? You ask. He taps his chest. If you've done it right, you don't notice. The simplicity of it hits you harder than expected. These incense clocks weren't about measuring life. They were about accepting it. You realize how different that is from your pocket watch's ticking certainty. The incense doesn't rush. It dissolves. As he resets one of the clocks, he talks about how each region had its own scent. Agarwood in Kyoto, sandalwood in Nagasaki, pine resin in the north. People could tell where you'd been just by smelling your sleeve, he says. Like the world leaving notes on you. You inhale deeply. The scent clings to the air like memory itself. So every timekeeper here leaves smoke instead of sound. You say? Sound fades faster, he replies. Smoke lingers. It finds corners, climbs walls, hides in hair. It's shy time. He lights another trail. The incense flares briefly, then settles into a slow red glow, sending up a whisper of silver smoke. It curls, twists, then flattens into an invisible rhythm. You can't see its progress, only its consequence. For a long while, neither of you speak. The workshop hums with quiet, a stillness you can almost hear. The incense burns on, marking the present in vanishing increments. Finally, the craftsman breaks the silence. Some historians argue, he says, that incense clocks were Japan's most honest way of telling time, because they reminded us how easily time disappears. You nod. And because you can't rewind smoke. He smiles, pleased. Exactly. He wraps a small stick of incense in paper and offers it to you. For travel, he says. Light it when you need to remember you're still moving. You take it, tucking it carefully beside the wax stub and the watch. Your pocket feels heavier, or maybe just more anchored. As you leave the courtyard, the scent follows you, faint and steady. The city's noise swells again, merchants shouting, wheels clattering, a dog barking somewhere far away. But underneath it all, you imagine the thin line of smoke still winding its way across the bench, time vanishing in fragrance. You pause at a crossroads, watching the sky shift toward the copper tones of evening. The light paints the rooftops in quiet fire, and the river glints like liquid glass. You think about all the ways humans have tried to trap time, wax, bells, gears, incense, and how each one, no matter how clever, always ends in disappearance. Maybe that's the point. Maybe we don't measure time to keep it. We measure it to say goodbye properly. The wind picks up, carrying the faintest scent of sandalwood from the craftsman's courtyard. It lingers in your sleeve, curling like a reminder. You take a slow breath, close your eyes for a moment, and keep walking west. The world smells like memory. The air tastes like smoke. And somewhere behind you, another bell falls, marking another hour you'll never need to count. By dusk, Edo begins to shimmer. Lanterns bloom along the streets like slow-growing fireflies, one by one, until the city glows with a kind of deliberate warmth. You follow the flow of people toward the river, where laughter and light ripple together across the surface like brushstrokes on silk. The smell of grilled fish and sweet sake drifts through the air. This is festival time, one of those evenings when the clock seems to loosen its grip. No bells, no candles, no incense trails, just the soft anarchy of joy measured in heartbeat and laughter. A boy runs past holding a lantern shaped like a carp. Its paper skin glows orange from the flame inside, and as it sways, it seems to swim through the twilight. You can't help smiling. He's timing his steps to its flicker, as though each bounce is a tiny second. At the water's edge, a group of women kneel to release their lanterns, tiny glowing boats drifting into the current. Each carries a wish, or maybe an apology, written in brushstrokes that the river will swallow before morning. The sight makes you pause. It's beautiful and quietly mathematical, time measured not in hours, but in distances between flames before they vanish. You find a spot near the pier, sitting beside an old fisherman mending his net. His hands move with slow precision, nodding and looping as though weaving time itself. Evening tide's running fast, he mutters, half to himself. Does that change your work? You ask. He chuckles, his voice a gravelly hum. The fish don't care what hour it is. But the lanterns, they tell me when to stop. You look out at the floating lights, now scattered like stars torn loose from the sky. You mean when they go out? He nods. When the last one dies, the river's done listening. That's when I go home. The idea feels profound and simple, like something the monks at the temple might whisper to each other before dawn. So the river keeps time for you? He smiles, not looking up. It always has. The water forgets faster than men, but it remembers the important things, like when to rise, when to rest. He gestures toward a small hourglass-shaped buoy bobbing nearby. It's carved from driftwood and wrapped in rope. That's mine, he says. An old friend carved it for me. I toss it in at dusk and pull it in when I can't see the top anymore. That's how I know the night's halfway spent. You laugh softly. A sailor's clock. He shrugs. More honest than the ones that tick. You glance again at the pocket watch hidden in your sleeve. For the first time, its rhythm feels out of place. Too exact, too eager. The fisherman's world runs on slower currents, ones that need no winding. The two of you sit in companionable silence. The lanterns drift farther out, their reflections stretching long and thin before dissolving entirely. One by one, they wink out, leaving dark spaces on the water where light once was. People always think light is what shows time, the fisherman says, squinting at the horizon. But it's the darkness that marks what's gone. The words settle deep in you, heavier than you expect. You think about all the vanished flames, temple candles, incense smoke, wax clocks melted to nothing. Every one of them marking absence more honestly than any gear or spring could. A gust of wind brushes your hair, cool and salted. Somewhere upriver, a group of musicians begins to play, shamisen and flute. Notes so soft they seem to belong to the air itself. The melody drifts over the water like perfume, fleeting but enough to make the lanterns seem to sway in rhythm. Some historians argue, you murmur, half to yourself, that Japan didn't just measure time, it performed it. The fisherman grins, still mending. Historians say a lot of things, but they're not wrong about that. He ties one last knot, pulls the net taut, and tosses it beside him with a sigh. When I was young, he says, we used to say the river had moods. If you threw your net too early, it would sulk. If you waited too long, it would pretend to be empty. You had to listen, not to the water, but to what it didn't say. You find yourself nodding, like the gaps between the ticks. He glances up, amused. Exactly. You get it. The festival's music swells behind you, laughter and bells mingling with the hum of insects. Somewhere, a vendor calls out his last batch of sweet dumplings, his voice rolling like a drumbeat across the docks. The night feels alive but tender, like a story that knows it's almost over. You thank the fisherman and stand. He waves lazily, already lost again in his work. As you walk away, you realize the lantern's reflections have vanished completely. The river now dark, absorbing the last traces of light without complaint. At the bridge, you pause and look back. The water glimmers faintly where the candles once floated, their ashes now mixing with the tide. It's strange. The more the city quiets, the louder the world feels. Crickets begin to chirp, the air thick with sound that doesn't measure time but fills it. You take the incense stick from your pocket, light it, and place it gently in the river. The current takes it immediately, the smoke trailing behind like a promise to no one in particular. It drifts, then vanishes. You whisper to yourself, that's one more second well spent. And somewhere, deep beneath the surface, the river answers, not in words, but in the faint rhythm of waves tapping against the shore, an echo that sounds almost like a heartbeat counting softly toward midnight. Midnight in Edo doesn't fall, it seeps. It begins in corners, between shutters, under the bridge arches, and behind the sleeping stalls of market streets. You feel it more than see it, a thinning of sound, a cooling of air, a silence that stretches like silk across the city's skin. You wander through narrow alleys where paper lanterns still glow like stubborn embers. A few tea houses remain open, low laughter, the faint clack of dice, a shamisen played by someone too tired to care if it's in tune. The smell of charcoal and sake drifts between the buildings. You're not sure whether the city is asleep or just pretending. At the edge of the district stands a small wooden tower. Not tall, not grand, but unmistakably deliberate. Its roof tilts sharply upward like a raised eyebrow, and at the top, a bronze bell sways faintly in the night wind. You realize you've found one of Edo's night watch towers, the Yanbanyagura. You climb the steps, each creak of wood echoing through the quiet. From the platform, the whole city spreads before you, roofs glittering faintly with moonlight. Beside you sits an old man wrapped in a faded indigo coat, a long bamboo staff across his knees. He nods when you sit. "Another soul who can't sleep," he says, voice like wind through paper. You smile. "Just passing through." He chuckles. "Everyone's passing through. Some just take longer." Below, the night watch begins its rhythm. From somewhere down the street comes the deep tonk-tonk of wooden clappers, two blocks struck together in slow, deliberate beats. "Fire watch," the man explains. They walk all night, reminding people the city's still breathing. The sound repeats, tonk-tonk, pause, tonk-tonk. Each interval precise, calm. You listen, realizing this, too, is a kind of clock. "You count hours by that?" you ask. He shakes his head. "Not hours. Safety. Every patrol that passes means we're still here." You lean against the railing, watching the glow of coals flicker from a distant kiln. "Feels strange," you say, "to measure time by what hasn't happened yet." He smiles faintly. "The best kind of time, don't you think? No disasters. No alarms. Just the quiet in between." The bell above you shifts slightly, catching the moonlight. Its surface bears marks, scratches, dents, faint carvings that almost look like writing. "We ring it only for fire," he says softly. "Or sometimes, to remind the moon she's late." You laugh quietly. Does she ever listen? He squints upward. "Only when she wants to show off." The wind rises, stirring the rooftops below. You see the movement of watchmen carrying torches, their flames like drifting stars. The pattern is mesmerizing, each flame marking a heartbeat of the city, never too close, never too far. Some historians say, you muse aloud, that Edo's fire watch was the first real night clock, public time marked by sound instead of sight. The man nods. And yet, no one remembers the clappers, only the fires they prevented. That's the trouble with quiet work. You glance at him. "So how long have you been up here?" He smiles, showing a row of teeth like worn pearls. "Long enough to forget which century I started." Then, more seriously, 40 years. Maybe 50. Hard to tell when you measure in nights. You notice the faint tremor in his hands, the way he taps his bamboo staff lightly against the floor every few minutes. "Old habit," he says when you ask. "Keeps rhythm. Like a pendulum, if I were fancy enough to own one." He points toward the horizon, where the black sky softens into gray. "When the east brightens like a fish's belly, I strike the bell once. That's my dawn, not theirs," he adds, nodding toward the merchants below. "They wait for sunlight. I just wait for color." The clappers echo again, fainter now. A dog barks somewhere, then stops. The night feels stretched, thin but not fragile, as if holding its breath before the day exhales again. You take out the incense stick the craftsman gave you, now half broken in your pocket. "Mind if I light this?" He shakes his head. You strike a spark, and the ember glows, curling smoke into the cold air. The scent drifts upward, mingling with the chill. "That smells like old temples," he murmurs. "Kyoto wood, I think, you say?" "Ah," he replies. "Time from another city." The two of you sit in silence as the incense burns down, the bell above swaying gently in the wind. You can't tell if minutes or hours pass. It doesn't matter. When the ember finally dies, he says, "We used to have 3 bells, one for dawn, one for fire, one for death. The last one rusted away. No one wanted to replace it. Superstition." He shrugs. "Mercy, maybe." You stand to leave. The horizon is now pale blue, the first hint of morning washing the edges of the city. The old man strikes the bell once, a soft, deliberate note that ripples across the rooftops. The sound is both beginning and ending, like a candle's last flicker pretending to be sunrise. He looks at you, eyes bright despite the years. You keep writing, traveler. The night always needs someone awake enough to hear it end. You nod. descending the stairs slowly. The city stirs below, shutters opening, footsteps returning, the faint clatter of pots. The clappers fade into silence. At the bottom, you glance back. The old man's silhouette stands against the growing light, one hand on the bell, the other holding his bamboo staff like a baton for the world's gentlest symphony. You realize, maybe for the first time, that the measure of a civilization isn't how it records time, but how softly it lets the dark hours pass. And behind you, as you walk toward the awakening streets, the bell tolls once more, calm, patient, eternal. The first sunlight of Edo morning is a hesitant thing, pale, almost apologetic. It slides between wooden beams and across tiled roofs like a painter testing his brush. You step into it, blinking against the faint gold haze rising from the river. The city exhales. Shops open. Doors creak. Somewhere, a rooster crows with the confidence of someone who has no competition. You find yourself near Nyanbashi, the bridge that's supposed to mark the center of the world, or at least the world as Edo knew it. Everything, it seems, begins here: roads, taxes, gossip, destiny. The market's already alive, the smell of miso and ink mixing with that familiar candle wax tang that never seems to fade. You pause at a stall where a woman is selling small wooden charms shaped like clocks. Lucky for merchants, she explains, holding one up. The charm is carved with the kanji for time and painted in gold. So business always runs on schedule. You smile. And does it work? She shrugs. Depends on whose schedule you believe in. As you wander, the crowd thickens. Monks in saffron robes, apprentices balancing trays, noblemen with attendants too sleepy to bow properly. The rhythm of the city has returned, but it feels different now. After nights spent watching time melt and burn and whisper, this measured bustle feels like theater. You follow the sound of hammering toward a courtyard where men in work robes are assembling something large and ornate. A tower made of dark lacquered wood, inlaid with brass and shells. Its gears glint in the sunlight. You realize, with a small shock, that this must be one of Japan's first mechanical clocks. A young engineer, his hair tied neatly back, notices your stare. Beautiful, isn't it? He says. It doesn't just tell hours, it translates them. You tilt your head. Translates. He nods eagerly. Western clocks divide the day into equal hours. But here, he gestures toward the tower's base. We don't live in equal hours. Our days stretch and shrink with the sun, so the gears shift with the seasons. The clock adjusts itself, like a polite guest. You look closer. Tiny wooden panels slide along tracks marked with kanji for dawn, noon, dusk, and night. A golden sun disk rises and falls in slow motion, its shadow crossing a painted moon. It's alive, you say quietly. He smiles. That's the point. Time breathes with us. A group of townspeople watches as the topmost panel clicks into place. The engineer winds the mechanism, not with a key, but by turning a weighted pulley. Inside, the gears murmur like rain on bamboo. Then, at last, a soft bell chimes. The sound is warm, almost tender, as if the machine is shy about announcing itself. You notice how everyone leans closer. Even the birds on the eaves seem to pause. For a moment, all of Edo is listening to a new kind of heartbeat. Human-made, mechanical, precise, but strangely gentle. A child whispers. It sounds like the temple bell, but smaller. The engineer nods proudly. That's the idea. We made it remember the old sound, even as it learns the new. You watch the dials turn, slow and deliberate, and realize that this clock isn't replacing candles or incense. It's answering them. Where the candle marked the body and the incense marked the spirit, this one marks the city itself. Organized, rhythmic, awake. Some historians, the engineer says, wiping his hands, believe Japan's first clocks were built to please the shogun, but I think they were built to comfort everyone else. To prove that even change can keep good manners. You laugh softly. A polite apocalypse. He grins. Exactly. The crowd disperses slowly, murmuring approval. The clock continues its quiet turning, and you stand there longer than you mean to, hypnotized by its steady grace. The sun climbs higher, and its shadow aligns perfectly with the small brass pointer on the clock face. It feels like the world just nodded in agreement. You start walking again, the rhythm of the gears still echoing in your mind. You pass a vendor selling paper fans painted with constellations, a monk sweeping temple steps, a group of children counting their footsteps in sync. 1, 2, 3, 4, pause, giggle, repeat. Everywhere you look, the world seems to be counting something. You cross another bridge, this one quieter, shaded by willow trees. The air smells of water and faint ash. You sit for a moment, watching ripples fold and unfold, small insects darting across their surfaces like moving punctuation. The incense from your sleeve has left its scent on your fingers, faint but persistent. You rub them together, half expecting to see smoke rise again. You think of everything you've seen. Wax clocks melting in silence, bells that mark fear and safety, incense trails that burn like invisible constellations, rivers that tell time by forgetting. The mechanical clock feels like an ending, but also a translation. Humanity's attempt to trap time in gears and ratios, as if to say, we can make this work together, can't we? But even as the new clock ticks confidently somewhere behind you, you can still hear, or maybe just imagine, the sound of wax dripping, the hush of smoke, the old pulse of unmeasured hours. You smile to yourself. They'll argue about this one day, you whisper. The historians. Whether this was progress or surrender. The river answers only with ripples. The sun tilts westward, painting the water in gold. The city hums, a symphony of hammering, footsteps, and distant bells, each one marking its own kind of time. You stand, brushing dust from your robe, and head toward the fading light. Behind you, the mechanical clock chimes again, steady, patient, and somehow humble. You don't look back. You don't need to. You already know how it sounds when something new tries its best to sound old. Evening finds you on the outskirts of Edo, the air cooler, the noise of the city now a distant murmur. The road stretches ahead, soft and amber under the sinking sun. You've walked this far without meaning to, following instinct more than destination, as though time itself were leading you somewhere it wants to end quietly. The fields around you glow with afterlight. The last of the farmers are gathering their tools, voices drifting lazily through the warm air. Somewhere, a temple bell rings its single low note. Not a signal, not a warning, just a gentle acknowledgement that another day has agreed to end. You stop beside a small hill where the grass grows wild, dotted with small white flowers that seem to shimmer even after the sun disappears. A narrow path winds upward toward an old shrine barely visible against the darkening sky. The wooden gate is crooked, its paint flaking, but the place feels awake. Waiting. You tie your horse to a post and climb the path. Each step crunches softly, the sound folding into the rhythm of crickets. Halfway up, you notice something flickering near the ground. A tiny candle, sheltered by a small glass frame. Someone has placed it there recently. Its flame bends in the breeze, stubborn but calm. You kneel beside it. The wax has melted unevenly, forming ridges that look almost like topographic lines on a map. You trace one with your finger and realize, this little candle is still measuring time, even here, even now. Inside the shrine, an old priest sits cross-legged before a tray of candles. Some are lit, others half-burned, others just pools of wax. His eyes lift as you enter, kind and unsurprised, as though he's been expecting you all along. "Traveler," he says softly, "you're late." You smile faintly. That seems to be a theme lately. He gestures toward the tray. "I keep them burning, one for each hour that has forgotten itself." You sit beside him. "There are a lot of them. More every year," he says. "People count differently now. By bells, by gears, by wages. But every moment still wants to be remembered." He picks up one of the candles, its wick blackened. "Do you know what these were used for?" You nod slowly. "The old clocks. The ones that burn to tell time." His smile deepens. "Then you know they were never about measuring. They were about presence. A flame can't hurry or wait. It just lives as long as it's allowed." You watch as he relights one with a thin taper. The new flame catches instantly, leaning toward the other like a greeting. For a while, neither of you speaks. The air smells faintly of wax and cedar. Outside, the world darkens to indigo, the sky pricked with the first few stars. Finally, he says, some historians still argue about when Japan's true timekeeping began. Was it the water clocks? The incense? The bells? Or was it the moment someone looked at a candle and decided to listen to it instead of just watching it burn? You don't answer. There's nothing to add. The question feels complete on its own. He looks at you for a long moment, then says, "You've been chasing time your whole life, haven't you?" You laugh quietly. Maybe. Or maybe it's been chasing me. Either way, he says, you've both grown tired. You feel that truth settle in your bones. Not sad, just inevitable. Like realizing a song has ended halfway through the final note. The priest reaches into his sleeve and produces a small brass holder. Take one, he says. For the road. You hesitate. What if it goes out? Then let it, he replies. That's how it tells you it's done. You accept it, placing the candle carefully into your bag. When you step outside, the air feels heavier, but not unpleasant, thick with the scent of cooling earth. The horizon has faded into violet, and the first fireflies have begun their small, deliberate dance. You mount your horse again. The road glimmers faintly in the starlight. Somewhere far away, you imagine the great mechanical clock still ticking, its gears whispering the new rhythm of the world. Yet here, in the countryside, you can still hear the old one, the slow, uneven pulse of things that refuse to rush. The horse snorts, impatient, and you pat its neck. All right, you murmur. One more ride. The candle in your pack sways softly with each step. You think of it as a companion now, a tiny, glowing historian that measures not minutes, but moments. You ride until the land opens wide, until the stars above are so dense they seem to hum. You can almost hear the echo of the couriers, their hoofbeats threading through the centuries, their messages carried still by wind and memory. When you stop, it's because the world feels still enough to listen. You dismount, take out the candle, and light it. The flame flutters, then steadies, small, certain, alive. The grass around you shifts with the night breeze. You lie back, the candle beside you, the horse grazing quietly nearby. The flame paints soft gold across your face, its reflection trembling in your eyes. You think of every way humans have tried to capture time, in wax, in smoke, in bells, in gears, and realize they were never really measuring minutes at all. They were measuring connection, the fragile, glowing line between one heartbeat and the next. The candle's flame dances lower. Its wax pools quietly, a slow sigh of warmth surrendering to gravity. You feel your own breath mirror it, slowing, deepening. The night grows softer. The stars blur slightly. Somewhere, a cricket begins its endless song, counting seconds no one else will hear. You close your eyes. The candle's last shimmer warms your cheek, then fades. The world exhales. Time pauses, just long enough for you to drift between one breath and the next, that sacred space where history and sleep meet and hold hands. The silence folds around you like silk, gentle and unhurried. And as your thoughts dissolve into the rhythm of the night, you hear, faintly, the sound of wax dripping in the dark, patient, steady, endless. End of script. Sweet dreams.